Hello and welcome.
This week we're looking at how to choose 2 amps for a wet-dry rig.
You moved me. Hey guys, welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here. Hello.
Beautiful. Really beautiful.
Indeed. Right. We've had a lot of requests for... Dan and I talk a lot about wet-dry amplifiers. And wet-dry means, Dan, in our world...
So we are taking the gain stages, and that is going to both amplifiers, but the modulation and time-based effects, delays and reverbs, are only going to one amplifier.
Yeah. It's an alternative way to do things. A lot of people just go stereo, so everything goes to both amps. Dan and I particularly like wet-dry. For all the reasons we won't go over here, you can watch that in previous videos. And also people's definitions of what is wet changes because we've got reverb on both of the amps, etc. But this is our definition of wet-dry. The next question that comes up is, well, what 2 amps can I use? And what are the things that I should think about when choosing those 2 amplifiers? So today, we're going to run through all those issues. We're going to go through a wide variety of vastly differing amps. And hopefully, we're going to come to the conclusion that it doesn't really matter.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see. So yeah, that's where we are. As you can see on the pedal board here, we've got a selection of nice things. 2 overdrives.
2 very nice overdrives.
Yeah. A chorus.
Yep.
A delay. 2 types of reverb, for which the reason will become apparent soon enough. And a tremolo.
Yes.
And you just heard what they sound like.
Glorious.
Yeah, really lovely. So what you just heard over the intro there is only the gain stage, which was this side of the Gladio, going to one of the amps. Don't even know which one it is. And the wet effects, which was, I believe, definitely delay, definitely reverb, and probably tremolo.
You had them all on.
Did I? Okay.
Yes, you had them all on.
Going to the wet amp. So that's what you heard.
Well, let's do a really quick demonstration of, we'll do the wet dry.
Yep.
And then we'll go back to dual mono so you can hear all the effects in both amps.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then back to the wet dry thing. So if we hear the wet dry thing, so you had that on, we had these.
I'll play the same thing I played over the intro, more or less.
What gets me is the trem.
Yeah.
There's the trem on one side and you still have the signal on the other.
Tell you what's really interesting about
man.
that is when both amps were taking all effects, it was harder to play.
Right, wow.
Because I was wanting to play in time with the trem.
Right.
Whereas when it was only coming out of one amp, I could hear the direct sound all the time. Anyway, you can watch all our previous videos on wet dry to delve into.
We're big fans.
More about that.
We're big fans, and it's a really inspiring sound. If you, so we're going to have a look at, as Mick said, just this idea of what amps. What are the what amps should I choose to do a wet dry rig?
So the first thing we're going to look at then is the basics, and we've chosen 2 very. I don't want to say common because that's sort of denigrating, but normal, mid-range, all valve amps. Both of them happen to be 40 watts. Fender Hot Rod Deluxe on stages everywhere across the globe. And Victory V40, the Duchess, a clean type pedal platform type amplifier when it's set this way. So these amps are matched more or less in headroom and volume at this point.
Yep.
And you just heard it. So Dan, do you want to have a quick...
Changage.
Yep, let's hear it maybe with... I'll switch a couple of gain stages in. I'll switch a couple of pedals on and off.
Okay.
And we can just hear that.
Okay. Man.
What a fantastic sound that is. I'm looking at the waveforms as they're recording, and Fraser, you can nod to confirm. Both of those amps are taking those gain stages pretty similar, aren't they? So they're both compressing more or less the same. One's not overdriving more than the other. They're both set to the same kind of volume and gain level.
Right.
So the next question is, what about if the amps are mismatched in power?
Okay.
So we're going to swap one of those 40 watt amps out for a 15 watt amp, and we'll be back in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail.
And we're back in the room.
As if by magic, the Fender Hot Rod Deluxe has disappeared, and there is now a Vox AC15 behind Dan. So we've got one 40 watt and one 15 watt amplifier. Here's what happens. Sounds weird in the room. It's going to sound even weirder to you out there in YouTube land. Check this.
Man. Boy, oh boy.
Right, salient points. What you noticed me do there was flip the phase on the amps. So before, when we had the Hot Rod Deluxe and the V40, they were in phase. All we did was swap the amps out, and all of a sudden, one of the amps is out of phase, which we could hear immediately. Here. It'll be even more apparent on the recording. Because depending on where you stand, it can be less and more obvious.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's a bit of a head scratcher phase sometimes, especially in a big room where you've got loads of reflections and stuff. Anyway, you will have heard very clearly what happened when we changed the phase on the Vox.
Phase dance?
Phase dance? Oh yeah.
We have 2 amplifiers. Mick is a speaker and I'm a speaker, and we're doing this. If the amps are out of phase, I will do this. So out of phase, one amp is pushing while the other amp is pulling.
Push the button.
Push a button and we're back in phase.
Oh, it's so clever I do that. I couldn't do that.
It's this stuff.
Yeah. So there you go. That's question number one. You've got 2 amps. What about phase and that about phase?
Yeah.
That's how it works.
And when you're setting them up as well, it does help to have the amps as equidistant away from you as possible. So try and get the speakers lined up, and if you've got one amp here
facing the wall and one facing forwards,
exactly. It's going to
because as soon as your sound hits a reflective surface and comes back, it's out of phase, potentially, depending on how far away that reflective surface is. So it's not cut and dried, but in an environment like this, it's very easy to hear.
Yeah.
So there we go. I mean, we've got 2 amps that are mismatched in power. One's 40 watts, one's 15 watts. But because they're set to more or less the same volume and headroom characteristic, not particularly loud in here, they react kind of the same. So the next question is, what if the amps are mismatched in gain?
Okay.
So what I'm going to do now is we're going to leave the V40 exactly as it is, which is fairly clean, and we're going to add some gain to the AC15 so it is overdriving.
Beautiful.
Yeah?
Yep. It's a great sound.
So you just heard that. The AC15 is now overdriving. The V40 is not overdriving as much. It might be just a tiny bit, but it's ostensibly clean. Which is wet and which is dry at the moment?
So the V40 is dry.
Okay, so if you play then, Dan, I'm going to add some reverb and delay with both amps on in a wet-dry configuration. Remember, the AC15, the overdriven amp, is wet.
Yep. It's beautiful.
Pretty killer sound.
Just awesome.
The wet amp was the overdriving one. So what happens if we swap those around? I'll do that, Dan. I'll
Okay.
just do it here. So now the wet amp is going to be the cleaner amp, and the dry amp is the one with the distortion in the amplifier itself. Play the same thing.
That's so cool.
As I say every time I get home, so far so good. You know, as you get older, the dad jokes start coming out, and I'm not even a dad. So far so good, right? Because we haven't changed the gain relationship into the front of the amps at all. All we've done is got one clean and one dirty, and they're more or less the same volume. You will have heard a marked difference in the sound of the effects.
Yeah.
And that's just about gain stacking. That's just about putting reverb and delay before overdrive or into a clean amp.
Yeah. Because when the reverb is going into the overdriven amplifier, or all the effects going to the overdriven amplifier, because there's no more headroom left in the amp. So you notice that the reverb and delay would have seemed much louder as opposed to when going to the amp with headroom.
Certainly dirtier and nastier into the overdriven amp. Yeah.
Because that amp's already limiting. It's already, so anything that goes in there, we can't get any louder, Whereas because we have headroom in the clean amplifier, we can set the levels up. We have so much more control over the wet effects.
Yeah, I mean, personally, as a point of opinion at this point, we both tend to prefer having the wet effects in the slightly cleaner amp.
Sure.
If you're running one slightly dirtier, but you'll have just heard the results, and you may prefer it the other way around.
Yeah,
all is good.
But that goes to say that, you might cerebrally, the idea of having your wet effects in a dirty amplifier is challenging, but actually when you hear it and sit down and play with it, it can be fantastic. I don't know if I would want that sound all night.
Yeah. Well, let's introduce the problem then.
Okay.
So the problem comes, your amps are now mismatched in gain. Mm-hmm. We said our question at the top of this section was, what about if the amps are mismatched in gain? Let's add another problem. Let's hit it with some overdrive.
Oh, yeah.
What you're going to hear is one of these amps get a lot louder and one stay more or less the same.
Yeah.
Dan? So let's set up that nice wet sound that we had.
Sorry.
What a killer sound.
It just takes me away.
Yeah, it's a massive sound. These amps are really doing good things together. So in that sense, you should have heard one of the amps get a lot louder. The wet amp should have got a lot louder.
Yeah.
Fraser, was that happening in the waveform? Yeah.
Yep.
Because the Victory was set with much higher headroom. It wasn't overdriving as much. What I know about the Victory is it's not ultimately high headroom, so it would have been overdriving a little bit.
Sure, okay.
Once you hit it with this, which has got crazy gain, it would have been overdriving a little bit, but it's not as overdriving as much as the AC15, which was set really gainy, flat out in the normal channel on the gain and down on the master. Mm-hmm. So quite heavy overdrive. If that works for you, and if that's the sound you really love, awesome. However, the thing to be aware of is when you step on your various overdrive pedals, one amp is going to get louder than the other.
Yeah. Especially with that overdrive, is set to push. You know what I mean? If the overdrive is set at unity, then, it may do. But if that overdrive is set to push the amp, then the amp that's already limiting is going nowhere. But the higher headroom amplifier is just going to take that and get louder. Yeah.
And then we're into that whole massive grey area of gain stacking and the colour of your gain and all of that, and it's a lovely thing. All right, let's move on. All very well for you guys, sat there playing at 100 dB with your loud amplifiers.
Your fancy pants amps.
Can you do this at low volume?
Okay, so now we're talking about doing it at low volumes. So we have the Marshall Class 5.
Class 5, an old Class 5.
So 5 watts?
5 watts, one of the first ones released.
Wow, okay.
So they've changed it a bit over the years.
Right.
Sorry, let's turn my phone off. But that's one of the old ones. 5 watts, 10-inch speaker.
Okay. And we also have the Bugera head.
Bugera. Yeah.
Bugera head. Okay.
Yep.
And let's go with that. And
it's a T5 Infinity, I think it's called.
Right.
Infinium.
So 2 5-watt amplifiers. Okay. And when they're on,
yeah,
they sound thusly. There's nothing quiet about that. That's still loud. You know, it hit 100 dB.
2 5-watt amps.
Yeah, crazy.
So let's get it down to 75 dB. 70.
Okay.
Let's go to see if we can go. I think 70 dB might be as loud as I can strum with no amps on.
Boy, oh boy.
66.6. The perfect reading for no volume playing. So let's go down then, Dan. Okay, so now we're down to where I can hear the strumming of my guitar almost louder than I can hear the amps. So Fraser is going to up the input gain on the recording so that the mics are turned up. The mics are more sensitive, so they're hearing a louder, they're gained up more, basically. So what you'll hear in your ears is about the same volume that you would hear with the amps really loud. But you can tell by the dB meter that it's quiet.
I think I've just had a revelation.
What's that?
So, this thing where people always ask us, because we get to sit here with loud amps and with these epic tones. And it's like people saying, yeah, but I can't do that in my apartment.
Yes, you can.
You can. It's so because what the wet dry thing does with the two small amplifiers, it gives you this sense of space and hugeness.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounded absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. It's really great sound.
And really inspiring.
It's tough for us because, as Dan just said, we play really loud all the time. So I'm hearing my pick against the strings and that. I can hear the guitar pretty loudly. But I tell you what, it wasn't tough to play.
Yeah.
It felt buttery under the fingers. All those things we talk about as guitar players about when we feel good, right? Not bad. Two
Wonderful.
5-watt amps. And we proved that they will do 100 dB, no problems. So if... The thing I always take away from this low volume thing is if you're like most of us are struggling for a big sound at low volume and stage volumes are down and down and down and down, forget home just for a second.
Yeah.
You turn up with 2 amps, everyone looks at you like you're crazy because why do you need to be any louder? Well, actually, you can be a lot quieter and a lot more massive if you do wet dry with 2 tiny amps.
Yep. And you're getting all the clarity.
Yep.
But this sense of space, wow.
And everything applies, doesn't it? Everything we've spoken about in terms of gain, relationship, all of that applies. It's just quieter.
I want to try one thing.
Cool.
On the Bugera, there's a I turn that to 0.1 of a watt.
0.1 watts, yeah.
Right? So I just want to do that and see.
Okay.
Because one of the questions is, we know that 5 watts is loud. We know 1 watt can be loud. So I want to see what happens when that gets turned down.
To 0.1 watts.
0.1 watts.
So let's turn it down to 0.1 watts and get it overdriving. Is that what you're saying?
Well, just to see, what is the volume of that amplifier? We're hearing it now at 5 watts, right?
Yeah.
Turned right down.
Yeah.
If we put it on 0.1 watts, what is the sort of clean headroom we're going to get out of the amplifier at that level?
Go on then. Do you want to turn the class 5 off for a second?
Sure. That's 5 watts. Okay, but turned right down.
Yeah. I think this next setting is 1 watt maybe.
Okay. So if you turn the master back up now. So that's 1 watt.
Yep.
And now 10% of that.
That's 0.1 watts.
Okay.
So here it is, absolutely flat out at 0.1 watts.
So can we hear also the headroom that has got at 0.1 watts? So at the moment it's cranked, right?
Yeah.
So if we turn the gain.
Not really. It's overdriving at 60 dB.
Okay, but
So, go on, sorry.
it's just saying, but that there's it's at that level, it's still fine. There's a little bit of dynamics there.
So what's wet at the moment? Which is the wet amp and which is the dry amp?
That would be the dry amplifier.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to flat out the Bugera at 0.1 watts.
Okay.
And we're going to bring the Marshall up to be the wet amp cleaner.
Okay.
Should we try that?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
here's
yeah.
flat out at 0.1. Now you hear that massive difference of what a really driving amp and a clean amp sounds like
Yeah, yeah.
when you play. Weird.
Yeah, it's very weird because you've got, so the thing with the clean amplifier, you get this massive peak in the transients. It goes boom, but then there's no sustain. Whereas the driving amplifier, it's all compressed, but it has this sustain. So if I play lightly, you nearly just hear all drive. But as soon as I hit hard,
that's bizarre.
Yeah, yeah.
So what we have there is two amps that are, well, not the same. Yeah, approximately the same power. One really overdriving, one not. The next question, Daniel, is what happens if the amps are wildly mismatched?
Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
What were we saying about wildly mismatched amplifiers? Hiwatt DR103, 100 watt, brutal, 1973. Head, Marshall Class 5. May I, Daniel?
You may. So what I love about that,
worked, didn't it?
yeah, it's just awesome. Now it's different. It's different than having the amps that are, you know, a lot closer together, because what you get, the main component of the sound is the Hiwatt, right?
Yeah.
As well it should be. But what happens when you dig in, you're getting that different level of sort of dynamics, sort of the way that the Marshall sort of compresses and limits, and that pokes through without sort of interrupting what's going on with all the effects and the Hiwatt sound.
And it just stays remarkably clear. So before we move on from proving the fact that you absolutely can use wildly mismatched amps, let us do this. So before, the Hiwatt was wet and the Marshall was dry.
Yeah.
Now we're the other way around. So I'll just come straight back in on that sound that I had, which I believe was reverb and
Trem.
trem. I thought the Marshall was just going to die under all that.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to cave in and you wouldn't be able to hear the effects and it would sound broken and awful.
It's like all those things we do, putting the overdrive before the reverb, and that sort of sound.
Sounded absolutely killer.
Really great. Really great.
Really amazingly good, actually. There you go. 100 watt Hiwatt, 5 watt Marshall Class 5. That sounded fan-bloomin-tastic in both configurations to me.
Yeah.
The next important question is, what about a valve amp and a transistor amp?
Perfect.
Yep. Right, miraculously, the Marshall Class 5 has disappeared and now we have a Blug Guitar Amp 1.
Mm-hmm.
So uses a nanotube in it, but it is a transistor power section.
Yes. Nanotube colours the power section, basically.
Yeah, but it's a
Transistor amp.
It's an analog transistor amplifier.
Beautiful.
Daniel Schwangi.
Great.
That works.
Yep, works great.
Tell you what I was hearing. Now, because both of the amps are really high headroom, the difference in available volume of things like gain pedals was colossal.
Through the roof.
And that was starting to hurt, actually.
Yeah.
That was
I got a little bit in the ear.
Yeah, that's enough of that.
Yep.
Too loud.
That's enough of that.
Yeah. Because there's no give in the amps.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
So yeah, what happens when it's a transistor amp, an analog transistor amp, and a valve amp? Everything is groovy. Next question. What happens when it is a digital amp and a valve amp?
Okay. I'm back in the room. Okay. This is really interesting, right? So let's hear these amps individually.
Yes, another switch out. We've got my 2 Rock Classic Reverb Signature and the Boss Katana 100. Now, hopefully this doesn't need stating, but the 2 Rock is an all-valve analog amplifier, and the Katana is an mostly digital amplifier.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So on their own, yeah?
Yep. Here we go. So this is the Katana.
Yep.
This is the 2 Rock. Now watch what happens when you put them together.
Sorry, I'm fighting tuning a little bit.
But you can hear that phasey thing. It's like, okay, this sounds out of phase. If
Yeah,
I switch...
it's not immediately apparent to me, so flip the phase backwards and forwards.
Right.
I'm going to play something different because my guitar's so out of tune.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is normally when you sum the two amplifiers and it adds all this energy in the bottom end, you're not getting that here. Because of the latency with the digital amplifier, it's never actually going to be in phase. Right. What we need to do is add the same latency to the 2 Rock to pull the waveforms back in line.
Okay, I want to prove that.
Okay.
And let's prove that by swapping out the digital amp for the Matchless, and I'll try and play exactly the same thing.
Okay.
And we'll do the phase thing again.
Perfect.
Yep.
Yep.
Right, Katana gone, Matchless in.
Mm-hmm.
That's a sound.
That is a sound.
So what I heard there from the playing position was a radical difference in phase.
Sure.
One sounded absolutely definitely out, and the other sounded absolutely definitely in.
Yeah.
And I wasn't perceiving that with the Boss, which leads me to believe, and it will be so interesting to hear the audio, that the Boss is neither perfect, or they're never perfectly in or out. The boss is closer, further away from being perfectly in.
Yeah, it's due to that latency. And the reality, yeah, like you said, they're never going to be perfectly in or out. But with the latency, the only way you could get it perfectly in would be to add a small amount of delay to the other amplifier.
Yeah.
One position is going to be closer than the other.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So one will sound more in than the other.
If you are having a trouble with that and you've recorded two guitar sounds that aren't perfectly in phase, just drag the waveform so that it is.
Right, there you go.
And that will make the one that's out of phase more in phase.
Yeah.
So in a recording situation, that's perfectly easy to do. Live, not so easy.
Sure. So one of the things with wet dry, and this is one of the reasons that we bang on about analog dry through a lot, is because we can simulate that effect, that latency effect, with a pedal that doesn't have an analog dry through.
Okay, so now we've taken the digital away from the amp and we've put the digital in the pedal.
Exactly. So what we're going to set up that exact same sound.
Yeah.
Right? But what I'm going to do, I'm going to swap out, I'm going to turn this reverb off that does have analog dry through.
Yep.
Right? I'm going to turn on the true spring that doesn't have analog dry through.
Okay, before we do that, can we get them set up so they sound kind of similar?
Yeah, I'm actually going to turn the reverb down quite a lot, so I'm not listening for the reverb. We're just listening for that phase difference.
Turn the reverb off then.
There we go. Turn the
Nice,
reverb off.
no reverb at all.
There we go. So this is the sound of the...
We'll keep the same sound we had before, yeah?
Yep. So here is the sound of the Empress and the amps in phase.
And yeah, you'll turn it on and off, the Empress?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, sorry for the continuity error. The eagle-eyed among you will have noticed the mistake that Dan and I were about to make. No wonder it sounded different. We had the output volume of the pedal all the way down, not the mix of dry and wet. So just to go over some ground, I've got the Gladio down here on the floor, which you can't see. It's down there because it's on my board and it needs power that I can't get up here. So anyway, the Gladio on the board, and I'm just going to switch the amps in and out of phase, right? Turn the pedal on. Loads more reverb. Now we'll turn the mix down so that you can't hear any reverb. The reverb that you can hear is just from the 2-rock. Now what we're going to do is switch the pedal on and off. So when it's on, it's going through the full AD conversion, and when it's off, it's true bypass, right? So you'll just hear the difference. I'll just do that once again with a clean chord so you can hear that, yeah. Back to the main show. So what's happening there is, because it doesn't have analog dry through, the whole of the signal passing through that pedal is getting AD converted.
Yep.
And that AD conversion is adding latency.
Exactly.
So if you are running stereo, that is not a problem because you get the same latency in both amps.
Yep.
If you are running wet dry, it's a big problem because the two amps are seeing two different things.
Yes. So that is a big consideration with wet dry. Making sure that, you know, any modulation or effects that you have in the wet signal, you've got to keep that analog drive through. It's really important. And to be fair, it's something that most people are aware of now. However, it's still very common to have a pedal that doesn't have analog drive through, like the new Mako from
like that.
Like that, you know.
Yeah,
and I was gutted with that one because the sound of that is absolutely fantastic.
Yes, the collider and the the collider, which is bits of that,
yes,
does have analog drive through.
Yeah.
But that one doesn't.
It doesn't.
Currently.
Yeah. So that's just the consideration.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, I think we're going to play out with when everything is working right.
Yes.
This isn't the worst dual amp setup you'll ever hear. I want to hear this Gladio particularly because this is a new overdrive pedal that I've found that I'm very pleased with, and I want to hear it through 2-rock because
you have schwang.
Let's both have some schwang. So to summarise, how do you choose 2 amps for wet dry? Number 1, choose any 2 amps you want. I think we've proved that more or less.
Yes.
With a couple of exceptions. The exceptions are, number 1, depending on the sound you want, you might want to think about getting the gain levels similar.
Sure.
Right? That's sort of what we discovered early on.
Yeah.
It sounded great with 1 amp cranked and 1 amp clean, but when you step on the overdrive pedals, then you have like this mismatch in level, which, if that's not what you're shooting for, isn't ideal.
Sure.
What did we then say? We said, well, pretty much any 2 amps will work together.
Yeah.
We even had the giant Hiwatt and the tiny Class 5 sounded cracking together.
Awesome. Sounded really great.
We also proved you could do it at really low volume.
Yeah. So, and 2 big things from that for me is that the first thing, choosing any 2 amplifiers that work together, it is a absolutely wonderful way to have a bit of your unique personality or, you know, just to find a unique sound that you connect with is really wonderful. But the other thing, and probably the biggest thing for me, was the quiet amplifiers.
Yeah.
And how massive that sounded.
Hugely.
So many people who are saying, you know, I can't play loud at home. What do I do? 2 tiny amps wet dry.
Yeah, it was a really inspiring sound
Really
to play.
inspiring. So inspiring.
So those are the do's. The do nots are you can't really mix an analog and a digital amplifier.
Correct.
Because the digital amplifier will introduce some latency, and that puts the 2 amps out of phase because you need to be aware of phase. You can use an all analog transistor amp and a valve amp, or 2 all analog transistor amps. Might even be you can use 2 digital amps if the latency is more or less the same.
If they're the same amplifiers.
Yeah, so 2
you'll be fine.
katanas wet dry.
Perfect.
I mean, brilliant.
Yeah.
The other do not was if your effects are not analog dry through and they are digital.
They can't go on the wet side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you will get latency when you switch it on.
Yeah.
And similarly, another thing to be aware of is some pedals flip the phase when you turn them on. We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the butt. There are ways around it.
There are.
All right, mate. That was interesting. It was
awesome.
I knew it was going to be interesting. It was more interesting than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
I loved it. Loved
cool.
it.
I want to hear this Gladio with gloriousness.
Have strong
Is what I want to hear. What a noise. I wish everyone could experience that.
I really do.
Okay. That was interesting, Daniel.
Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
I learnt stuff then.
Me too, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Good.
People, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone that comments and joins us for the live VCQ on Mondays as well. That's wonderful.
Yes, there'll be lots of comments about this, which we will answer on Monday.
Yes. Also, massive thank you to our preferred retailers in the UK and Europe is
Anderson's Music of Guildford in Surrey.
and our dear friends in Australia.
Pedal Empire of Brisbane in Queensland.
Also, there are some links in the description below. If any of these pedals and things takes your fancy, there'll be links for you to go and check those out. And if you purchase them, then it helps us fund the show.
Yes.
I thought that was very well said by me.
It was nice. It was nice. Yeah. Yeah. And please go to that Pedal Show store and buy t-shirts such as these matchy ones that Daniel and I are sporting at this very moment.
Twinning.
I think this video is going to go out long before Andy Timmins joins us with the TPS band for a string of 4 dates up and down the United Kingdom.
I cannot wait. It's going to be so great. Also, massive thank you to our patrons on Patreon. Thank you guys so much. Okay, well, awesome. Be good. Have a great week. We'll see you soon.
Oh, yeah, geezers. Have a great week, isn't it, League?